Hey everybody. Well, welcome back. Here we are. Hope you again had a good weekend. And I have new wisdom to impart. And by the way, there's my doggy. Sally. She's just a mound right now. Anyway, all right. So anyway, I like what I've seen so far from you guys. And I've done a good job so far. I've actually graded some papers for the assignment that's due. You'll be seeing this on Monday. So I'll say today, due Monday, at the end of the day, profile on somebody you know. Again, can be anybody, it could be, just I actually encourage you to review somebody you know, basically, because, I think at this pandemic situation right now, not pandemic, whatever, but the situation we have right now with asynchronous, but it's probably much easier for you to actually just really just kind of interview somebody who's in close proximity, and then maybe I want to really just work on the writing end of things first. So I think that's actually just important to do that, so you don't have to like worry too much about trying to dig into somebody's past too much. Um, I have a couple of examples of stories I thought like worked pretty well, but like use some improvement. It'll also give you an idea if you haven't seen it already. What a graded paper looks like. Okay. Um, so anyway, so what we have here, what I'll do is I'll share the screen. Okay. All right. And there's my screen. And oh, not that one. I'm sorry. This, no, not that either. Let's see. Sorry about that. Sample one. Okay. I left some names off this. But anyway, just wanted to kind of give you an idea. Now, these stories were actually like I would consider C-level stories, and I will once again get into what the rubric essentially is for this class, but which again is posted on the modules section of the Canvas site. Um, so what we're looking for is something kind of like sharp, specific, something in the lead that basically gets like right to the point. And also, I'll talk about the readings, which also are due, which is chapter 7, 9, and 13, and they get into this. Okay. So basically, we have a story, and again, it doesn't have to be this kind of story that just kind of knocks your socks off, and that's no offense to the writer. Okay. Just saying that, this is interesting enough to have somebody who's actually just getting a good job out of school and that actually provides some sort of news information, something aspirational, inspirational, whatever. Okay. So Adam Sum, a recent Rutgers University graduate, started a full-time job, and I basically said this is unique and works as a lead. So it's better. I mean, there's so many people coming out of college right now who aren't getting jobs or are struggling to do that. Um, okay, so one of the things I did, you'll see on your papers when you get them back, or if you've gotten back already, you'll start to see me do this thing called attribution. Okay, attribution. What is attribution? Um, okay, so it's talked about in the book, but attribution is the way to verify, and I probably dealt with this a little bit last week, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. Verify and source information and footnote. It is the journalism form of footnoting. Okay. And what it basically is he said, she said, they said, whatever pronouns you would use. Uh, Sometimes it's best to maybe just use the person's name. And like I said on the last, the person, when the person's actually first identified in the story, it's the full name first. And then after that, it's the last name that's referred to or a pronoun. Okay. Um, so basically, when you have a situation like this where you have information you're given, it's much you should have at least one point in each paragraph where you basically say where this came from. It's a way of verification. It gives the reader an idea like this actually wasn't just made out of thin air. Okay, we have so many situations right now with credibility and you know journalists like trying to fend off this whole crap about fake news and all that. We need people to know that this actually did come from somebody's mouth, or it came from a document, like according to a document or something. Just basically giving people an idea this came from somewhere, and also gives people an idea, like in that search to obtain the most or to get the most obtainable version of the truth. Maybe they can judge the source by the credibility of the source. because sometimes people will voice their opinions and that sort of thing. But when you use attribution, okay, so use attribution when you have an opinion, okay, somebody voices an opinion. So basically, you want to make sure that it's, people understand it's coming from someplace other than you, because your goal is to be objective and a fly on the wall and keep your distance from yourself 10,000 feet up from the material in the story. Okay, and then little known facts, or maybe even medium known facts. I mean, there's so much information. I mean, that we get for news stories, we're not there to see it. We're not there to hear it. It just happens. I mean, if there's a car crash on the street, are you there to actually know that it actually happened? I mean, you could actually go there, that sort of thing. So many times now, journalists don't even leave their seats. They just get the information from the police and that sort of thing and report it that way. A lot of times, you just don't have the time to actually go there to the actual scene, that sort of thing. Somebody gets hurt or something like that. Again, you're not there. You're not a doctor. You can't necessarily identify, what the injuries are, that sort of thing. So basically, you need somebody to actually provide you that information. So that's the difference between this. Okay, like Biden is president. Now, when you have well-known facts, that doesn't need attribution. Something that's completely undisputed. Okay, so Biden, I know. I'm not going to get into the whole conspiracy crap. Okay, I know people deny this. Okay, this is ridiculous. But Biden is president. That's an undeniable fact. Okay, sorry. If you're an election denier out there, you shouldn't be in journalism. I'm sorry. That's just crazy. I'm sorry. Now, but if you say Biden is a bad president or Biden is a good president, that's an opinion. Okay. And that needs attribution. He said, or she said, or they said. Okay. So that's an opinion that would need that. Okay. And again, a little known fact would be, is preparing to bomb New Jersey. I don't know. That's maybe something he's planning to do. It's not something he's planning to do. Okay, sorry. Just, actually, he probably would not bomb New Jersey because that provides him like 12 votes. But anyway, that would be something that would be said in the back room, that sort of thing. It may be something that actually could be happening or something, but you're not there to hear it. It's something that could be in dispute, and so that needs requirement, he said. How about something a little more realistic? He's preparing to, let's see, declare, she did this already, is planning to supply $40 billion to fight cancer. Okay. Again, something that maybe like is being discussed in the back room. So it's like he said. Okay. So that's when you use attribution. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start seeing that actually. Now, I don't grade people down at this point in their stories if they don't have it. Okay. I don't expect people to have it. It's not something you're kind of like taught in English classes and that sort of thing. A lot of people just start from scratch here. So you basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to incorporate that in your work initially by just basically identifying places in your homework that need attribution. You're not going to be down. You're not going to get a lower grade because you don't have attribution just yet. Okay, but you need attribution just for future reference in your stories. I mean, we don't know about Adam Sum. We don't know. We're not in the room there where he's like working hard at his prestigious company. So we need to basically have some sort of attribution. Okay. I think one thing that like I've noticed in some stories. Now, this is actually a decent story. It's a good story. Got a C plus, but it kind of like goes into like background about like how he got the job. I spent months perfecting my consulting strategy and making connections in well-known companies because I have been dreaming. Because that's good information. It's good to know. Has worked hard to land his position, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem with that is that's what they would call background, okay? That's what led up to the present, okay? You want to basically get into like, okay, so this is unique enough to write about, a unique enough job to lead about. So what is the job? What does he do? What does it involve? I like to know, actually. I like to know about this consultant job, especially if I'm somebody who's maybe interested in actually doing this job or knowing that there's a work out there or something that's worth doing. I want to know. I mean, how much to pay, that sort of thing. That's so if this is a job about Adam Sum getting this job, I want to know about the job and what he does and what it's involved. That's the present day. That's why I'm actually reading this story. But doesn't mean this other stuff is like unimportant. It's just not as important. It's the stuff that led up to what goes here. And that's actually, I mean, that's good to know. It's good information, but it's not a job. Sorry, it's not a, the lead is not a story about what led up to getting the job. The lead is about the job. Okay. So so that's what I've seen so far in some papers, that basically we really need to kind of have that meat in there. But basically, like, and that to me is like what kind of like the differentiates when I say like a story. I've identified. I've shown you what the what my essentially my rubric is and everything. And the difference between essentially a B and a C plus is organization usually. Organization meaning that like maybe like I can understand what the story's about. The information is there, but it just feels like it just needs to be ordered in a way that's actually like correct and straight and gives me an idea like from first paragraph down to the bottom what the story's about. It's on a linear um it's linear. Okay. So, and it's new and it's fresh. Okay. So that's why this story is not a B. Okay. So it needs more of that in there. Okay. I'm not a fan of very long quotes. You'll see that. Okay. I would much rather you actually just, you got to be really a storyteller, even in news. Okay. You got to be like a person who's actually like, you know, takes the stuff that's said out there and like synthesizes it and makes it readable here. That's why you're in the job, to be the professional writer. So you're going to take that information and make it more readable. Okay. So experience has really shaped me. And I don't, a lot of people also skip over quotes, they jump over them. So you want to like, especially if you have like important information about stuff that like, maybe like, especially if it's a story about a job and the quote is information about the job itself, I'm going to consider that important. Okay. And I want to know about it. And it really should be like outside, it should be actual, what they call paraphrasing. You should actually paraphrase more than actually, okay, direct quote. Okay. I mean, here we go. So this experience has helped shape me. Not only did it become a consultant by practicing real world problems with other students, but I also learned how to be an entrepreneur. See, a quote should be quippy. Okay. It should be like something that shows a little motion. It's easy to read. I think that actually, like, the only thing that's really like kind of like good that works as a direct quote is like this part right here. Okay. The experience has really shaped me. It's interesting. It's quippy. But what I would do is I would actually take this part and essentially turn it into paraphrase material from the writer itself. So you would say something like, take the information without quotes, say, Sum became a better consultant and actually it also means it's not many fewer words, but there's fewer words. Okay. And learn how to learn how to be an entrepreneur by opening a business. So maybe you don't need of my own. Maybe you do it as this, so it's much more direct, by opening his own business. Sum became a better consultant by practicing real world problems with other students, and he learned how to be an entrepreneur by opening his own business. Doesn't that read better than what was in the quote before, don't you think? It's a little more direct, sleeker, active voice, the whole thing. And then the experience has really shaped me. So that's what you do. When you collect information, you basically want to have it in a way that it actually is not just repeated. Okay, like a stenographer, I always say. You'll see that, you're right, like the court stenographers that type everything that's being said in the courtroom. You don't want to be just that. You want to be the interpreter. Okay. Okay, I always actually say there's actually like a way of actually approaching that. And when you, I mean, it's just like it's just like what you would do in a class where you take notes and that sort of thing, any class. You don't necessarily write everything down that's being said. Okay. You listen first. Okay. You listen, you try to really understand what's being said. Okay. And then what I say is you internalize, okay? Then you write, but when you typically take notes and that sort of thing, and then you put them into the story, you summarize, okay? And then maybe with like you hear something that's said that's maybe a kind of quippy, that sort of thing, and then that's the kind of thing you write down in your notes that actually is direct word for word or something. But typically when you take notes, you typically like summarize. You really want to like I've seen people actually like go to news conferences and they not even like really lift up their pad and take notes. They just listen, you know. They get an idea of what's being said, and then that actually gives them a better idea of like what questions need to be asked. Okay. So listen, internalize, write, summarize. Okay. I always tell the story. When I was a freshman at Rutgers, way a long time ago, Francine, poor Francine, I don't remember her last name, but she wrote down everything that was said in our psychology 101 class, every last word. I mean, it was really kind of ridiculous to be honest with you. She's a nice person, but I have to admit this, and it's horrible for me to admit this, but I did miss class a few times. And what we would do is we would actually just she was so nice, she would just actually let her look at her notes. So we would read her notes and we would just basically like summarize the notes. And then we actually got a better grades than she did because if you ever notice, if you write down everything that's being said, you're not really listening. You're kind of doing it like a robot. You're kind of just like it's almost like there's your brains in one mode where you're not really kind of like taking in what's being said, you know? So we were able to read our notes and be able to understand what's being said, you know? And sometimes we would do that actually because the teacher was awful. So we would actually just read it even if we went to class. So, all right. All right, so that's that one story right there. Okay. Let me show you another story that was handed in. Okay. This is like a story that's always a little bit difficult to deal with. And sometimes I feel badly when like somebody has like comes they feel like they come up with the aha moment that makes that person unique. But there's one little problem with that. This unique incident happened 4 years ago. So that's a long time ago, you know. A lot can happen in 4 years. You know, is the person around? Is the person here? Is the person, you know, what's happening? Now, this particular writer actually did a good job of actually like trying to actually like pull the what's new into the story. It's just that there wasn't enough of it. Okay, developed up high. Okay, so Raoul van de Born, a Dutch student, took a once in a lifetime chance with a craftsman focused school trip to Morocco 4 years ago. I actually think that right here. This is the sentence that actually this probably could have worked as a lead. Yeah, two sentences, I know, but whatever. Without it, he never would have known the true craftsmanship was and how he would use local goods to help those globally. Basically, like that comes a little bit closer to show that this still has an impact on his life, Roll's life, and that we, want to, write about like not just like what happened a long time ago, but like how does that impact now? What makes that important now? Timeliness is still important, even if an interesting, unusual thing happened a long time ago. Okay, and what this particular writer did was talk a lot about the trip, but again, the trip was like 4 years ago. So, what we want to do is we want to like get the stuff that's important here. So the travel to Morocco, it's probably a bit of a long quote, was a special moment due to never having left the EU before. I was going to meet people from other continents, see a different style of living. So that shows like kind of like current impact, opening eyes to new cultures, certain things. That's important. And not everybody has done this, gone to this certain place, learned these certain things and then and then had this sort of an impact on their life. Okay, so here's another one. They showed us how we were in the world of society by using local products rather than imported from everywhere. This way you help local communities and also have something unique. So I guess basically again there's something here that kind of shows open this person's eyes, roll his eyes up to like how this um basically like has still has an impact on his life. I am not a fan of conclusions. This kind of comes across as a conclusions conclusion, but the funny thing is actually this is actually information. This is the problem with conclusions. Okay, you don't have conclusions in news stories. I'll be getting into this, get into the chapters, but basically you don't have that in news story. Okay, in a news story, you typically just kind of end it. I'll be talking about this, but it's the inverted pyramid style where things just kind of dwindle down. The most important things happen at the top, and then they kind of dwindle down. And what you typically end with actually is a quote. Okay. The conclusion is it's a story. Again, a news story is like an upside down story. The mystery is solved in the first paragraph. The theme essentially concluded in the first paragraph. So don't like wait till the last minute to like basically tell people what they need to know. Now, freshly out of trade school, he plans to further what he learned. He hopes that he can share his knowledge. Well, that's important. That's interesting to know. It shows current impact. It shows that he's actually kind of changed. He's going to do something. He's going to do something that's unique. This really should be like probably paragraph 2. Okay, actually. Oops. Okay, this should be probably like way up here. Because it's the current impact. It shows what's happened in the last 4 years and how this has changed him. Now, Fresh Out Trade plans to go further with what he's learned. He hopes that he can share his knowledge with local communities. With the newfound support, he can continue to produce crafts, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm not sure if actually that goes with it, but basically, like, that's interesting to know that this is basically something that's kind of helped change his life. That means that's current. What happened 4 years ago, it shows impact. Okay. All right. So that, again, that story again, remember that it's due the end of day Monday, the profile story. Okay. I talked about attribution, and then what's going to happen is, now this is actually my again, I haven't actually, I'm recording this actually on Saturday, so so it's actually a couple days ahead of time, but I'm going to be posting this by Monday. Okay, so you'll see it fresh and new. You'll have a rewrite option. Okay, and so please rewrite the first grade assignment. Okay, it's not an option if you get an R, and there's been a few R's already upgraded. If you received an R, you have to rewrite to obtain a passing grade. If you got a C to a B plus, you have the option to write it to a higher grade. And again, here's the sample of a solid, profile story that was written some time ago. All right. That will be due a week from today. We also have a new assignment that also be due a week from today, meaning Monday. Okay. But really like you to kind of spend time and really trying to get this right. If you feel like, I've had a couple people ask me questions if you feel like they're heading on the right track. If you want to send me an email doing that, that's fine too. But that will be posted. You're actually going to see, and then you're going to see the second assignment also posted. So right here, which I'll be talking about later on. Okay. All right. So again, the rewrite option, if you want to go back to like, let's go back to like our rubric, which you can find under the modules. Oh, that's funny. I never actually. I always put the lectures in here too. Anyway, all right. So what do we got here? It's under week 3, September 19th. This week, actually, I figure at this point, I put in a week 3 because that's when people again will see what's going on and see they'll start getting grading their grades and that sort of thing. And the first grades, all right. Again, A, publishable, understandable, accurate, clear focus. That's an A. Okay. Single theme and specific. I allow some leeways, that sort of thing. Okay, but now this is basically like, again, single themed and specific. Basically, a few mistakes, but requires some editing, maybe in terms of clarity, and maybe even some in terms of focus. But it's generally organized. But maybe like there's some like the wording is maybe like a bit unfocused. Even the theme could be a little bit unfocused. Well, maybe there's a little bit of disorganization. Okay, not a lot. Must be accurate. Here, same deal as B is basically something that largely is like focused, but maybe requires a little bit more substantial editing. It's understandable, but it lacks clarity and focus. So I feel like if you have a story that's basically something that happens like 4 years ago, that's not the complete story. Okay. So that means that it lacks the clarity to basically identify this as a new, fresh story. Okay. I mean, it's really subjective what I'm showing here, but that's how I feel. On the first draft, I don't give out a D, an F, or an F. Okay. I give out an R. That means you have to rewrite it. Okay. And again, I give you the grading breakdown here. Okay. Which again, I plan to have actually like 7 total assignments. So this, and of course, at the end of the semester, your assignments count more. Okay, we're not there yet. Right now, like this first assignment, essentially will probably count 9.1% of your writing grade, and your writing grade again is 70% of your total grade. Okay. All right, so let's go to the chapters, okay? Which again is supposed to kind of basically help you understand and basically um, supplement what I talk about here. And basically you have chapter 7, which is about basic news leads, which I've shown you talked about a bit already. They give you some ideas of like where to get or how to get there. You have like a central point to a story, and it can be very specific what that central point is. Okay, you try to get as specific as possible. What they try to do is they try to show this chapter does get into things that I don't really like talk so much about in writing for media. I talk about it in digital news, and actually, it's like preparing for the digital story. I talk about how the central point to a story package essentially is what we do in Newton journalism nowadays. So there's not just like a written story, but there's also a video element to it usually. Um, there's like a lot of times there's like a podcast or whatever. There's sort of branches or what they call sidebars or follow-ups to stories now that actually like kind of branch off the larger story. Okay. There's different types of leads I've talked about. There's a summary news lead where you basically kind of summarize what's happened in like maybe like if it's a car crash, you want to be as specific as possible. You try to avoid all of these like these you try to in a news lead you really try to avoid like all these like different like you try to be as specific as possible and try to get to like the heart of the matter, and that is one Mechanicsburg man is dead and another severely injured after the bicycles. You don't get into like all the different biography information, that sort of thing, because that really kind of weighs the story down. You try to be as specific as possible, and later on maybe it's about I've talked about news basically starts with what's most important and moves down to what's lesser, not as important. That's how the story kind of moves down, and then some of this information can kind of weigh down a story. It's hard to read, numbers, that sort of thing. Maybe the name of the street's like hard to read, so maybe you come down with that stuff later. But you basically just try to be as simple and as direct as possible. One mechanics man is Bergman is dead. It's actually in Pennsylvania, I believe. Another is severely injured. A bicycle was riding, struck by a drunk driver. Getting right to the point about exactly what happened. Okay. Um, you know, again, more about the who, what, where, why, when, which I've talked about, and you try to answer those questions as much as possible in a story. I mean, in a lead, but you can't really do that. So you try to like break down the rest of the story that way. Okay. Um, basically like you have your an idea and an angle, and basically you have to basically you have a headline that we don't worry about in this class, but basically the lead essentially is a sentence. It's more than just Microsoft begins latest layouts, but basically it tries to show as much of the who, what, where, why, when as possible. Microsoft has started cutting thousands of positions, mostly in the sales department days after announcing it shift sales, basically showing impact, showing a bit of the why that this happened. Okay. Um, okay. It's important to use strong active verbs. I mean, you know, basically like something didn't just like, it caused somebody to die, it killed them. Okay. You want to basically get as direct and as active as the point. Basically magnitude means impact, stressing the unusual. We've talked about that, the importance of being unique, the importance of being as local as possible, because maybe like, okay, you try to avoid again like saying somebody's name unless it's somebody like again like well known, okay, like Queen Elizabeth in the league, because that's actually part of the news story. I hate to downplay people, but that's just the way it is. Okay, not everybody knows a Mechanicsburg man, so that's why you wouldn't put the name in the lead. Okay, again, because the name is actually something that's maybe hard to pronounce. Not everybody knows who that is. Okay, um, be objective. We talked about attribution. As I've said, that would be something you're going to start seeing in your stories. Okay, strive for simplicity. Trying to get as much details as possible on what happened. Um, if it's especially if it's like a crime story or something like that, you want to get the facts are what will really kind of like carry the story. I mean, I've had people ask me 100 times, like, how do I get the 500, 800 words? Like that's very hard. That sort of thing. Well, that's where you try to like really avoid, getting into the adjectives and that sort of thing. But so many times the facts are what like matter. Okay. And if you get enough facts, especially if it's something about somebody's job, okay, about being a consultant or something like that, you get enough information about what they do, you will get to that 500. Okay. I always tell people that you try to get at least three different things that back up the story. And those three different things are like essentially like basically like identified throughout the course of the story. Okay. And then you provide details on those three different things. Okay. Which I'll get into more specifically. So that's chapter 7. Um, okay, so basically now we get to the body of a news story. Chapter 9 is actually another chapter I've asked you to read. All right, so this actually gets into like what I've talked about, the inverted pyramid. Okay, the inverted pyramid style. Inverted pyramid stories arrange the information in descending order of importance and newsworthiness. The lead states the most newsworthy, important, or striking information and establishes the central point for the rest of the news story. The second paragraph provides details that amplify the lead. Okay, and really the rest of the story provides details essentially that amplify the lead. Okay, so basically the idea again is like that this is the inverted pyramid story right here. Okay, let's get a little bit bigger now. Bam, 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 bam. Okay. And there you go. It's an upside down triangle. Okay. So basically, the lead summarizes the story. Essentially, that's what it does. This is what we do in our typical hard news stories. I know we're going to get into this later too, but a lot of your feature stories actually will have a lead that they call a delayed lead, something that's longer, something that's a little more suspenseful. But what we're going to be dealing mostly in this class, especially early on, and past the halfway point of the semester, is essentially a hard news lead, something that essentially summarizes the story as I showed you before. Okay. And then maybe like this deals with like essentially like a crime story. So basically, you start to deal with maybe the lesser important details where you identify the injured. Okay, that happens in like paragraph 2. Okay, paragraph 3 explains how the accident occurs. So you go into the who, what, where, why, how. It's all a matter of priorities. What you think maybe is the most important thing to identify. I think basically summarizing the story identifies and answers the question, what happened? Okay, and that's really what needs to come first. Okay. Paragraph 4 reports charges, gets into more specific, again, judging kind of what people are more interested in first and going to last. Okay. And then quotes, like I said, direct quotes are not the most important thing in a news story. You want to like, they're quippy, they're colorful, and they provide humanism to the story, but they go down later typically in a story, unless sometimes you have stories about people making crazy statements like a Mel Gibson or somebody like that, or a Trump or somebody like that. Sorry. And then that becomes the story itself. Okay. Then it gets into like maybe the more outer details of like, unusual damage to the cars. One of the first things you probably want to know is like, is somebody hurt or killed? Okay. And like, and of course, another thing we want to hurry about is like who that was. You kind of almost have to put yourself in a reader's shoes and like think to yourself when you write these stories, like, what do I want to know first? What's new? What's fresh? And of course, I mean, I hate to say it, but you also want to know like how it might impact my drive, my commute, that sort of thing. That's usually like one of the most important things that people want to know about. And then you get into the minor details. Okay. So that's the inverted pyramid style. Okay. So it's an upside down triangle. Sometimes it's like I like to say that sometimes it's not always like that. Sometimes it's more like a mushroom, where they have the most important details, but then the details are actually kind of or just as the top details are just important as the bottom details. You see that sometimes in a you'll see that in your profile stories. I mean, many of the details you provide on that person, I mean, the details are just as important, but at the bottom. But that's why we avoid conclusions, because the conclusions usually identify important information that we need to know. Okay. And we don't put that at the bottom, because by that point, like most people, and again, most people don't read past the first or second or third paragraph. Okay. All right. This is why we read the book, because the book actually provides the information that kind of supplements what I talk about. And I talked about background too much too soon. Again, you don't avoid devoting the entire second paragraph to background information. The second paragraph is following this in the following story is dull because it emphasizes routine, insignificant details in this particular case. Um, you know, basically like blood supplies are dangerously low. I want to know how low, okay? I want to know like how the Red Cross feels about this, you know? I want to know like, well, how bad is it? How, do I have to run over and like, give my give up myself, that sort of thing, okay? Ending the story, the term kicker can have two meanings. It can refer to the additional line set above the story. Ending the story as well. Well, I mean, is important because it helps nail down the central point. Well, yeah, but I mean, but a lot of times actually it just means like just kind of ending the story. And a lot of times actually the way to end a story is with a quote, like I said, and they call it a walk-off quote. Basically just like a way of saying goodbye, and like quotes being the least important thing in the story, lesser important things in the story. Why not end it that way? Okay. So that's how you would typically end it. So you're going to see me like essentially write stories that basically, or writing your stories, say like no conclusions. That I will definitely be writing that. There's no question. And that's nothing against anybody. That's just what you're used to doing in your world. And I can't blame you for that. It's just what we're used to doing in the whole thing about like, what I did my summer vacation. You're told to write like essentially a topic statement, and then and then essentially like, a conclusion. Okay. Using transitions, I consider transitions to be very important, and I'm going to give you this. This is what I've given you so far. Essentially, is the exoskeleton to a story, identifying the who, what, where, why, when. Okay. Well, there's an interest skeleton, if that's a word. Okay. That basically how you kind of like organize things so that they actually come across in a clear and focused way. Transitions help stories move from fact to the next in a smooth, logical order. The call from the train analogy we use at the beginning. Okay, well, that's fine. But basically, what they do is they help kind of guide the reader along. Okay, from point to point to point. Okay, and I mean, so what they do is they kind of help the reader go through the story. Okay, it's actually essentially that paraphrase information I talk about that identifies the facts that you need to know, in addition to like what I mean, the lead basically summarizes what happens, and then basically the rest of the story kind of helps identify the more minor points that you need to know. And essentially you do that by essentially a transition. Sometimes it's not as easy or clear to do that, maybe like something like a crime story, but in a profile story it's a clearer device that you should use. Okay. And what you typically do is you have your lead. Okay. And then you have essentially like a transition. Okay. This is something again you would do maybe like in a little bit of a later story like we're doing right now, like the profile. Okay. Because typically on a crime story, like everything's a transition. You're transitioning from point to point to point. Okay. What you're doing with your profile stories and maybe future stories is you're going to have actually a little bit more kind of stories that go beyond just the simple facts, but maybe like get a little bit deeper, dig into a little bit deeper into the situation. So you have a transition. So let's say you have a lead that basically is about somebody like it's about maybe something that's happening on campus. Like it's not just about one specific crime, but it's about lots of crime is happening at Rutgers, and it's scaring people. Okay. So basically you want to kind of break things down to like how it's doing that, so, or why, or whatever. So maybe your first transition deals with like, okay, some say it scares them, like why or how it's scaring them. Well, some say it's scaring them. This breaks down the lead, as I was saying, scaring them because all the alerts they get in their email, right? All right. And then you have what you essentially you can do this when you're not dealing with like a specific crime story. You can do this in a more substantive story like we're doing with this profile. And then as you go into what they call an anecdote, you try to get like an anecdote, something that basically kind of like goes into maybe more specific slice of life to back up the lead and the transition. Okay. So you basically have maybe like that person, John Brown said he gets maybe some specific like moment in their life that kind of backs up everything that's being said. He jumps from his seat whenever he gets an email from, what's it, Kenneth P. Top? Okay. And then maybe you come in with a quote. Okay. Yeah. I always, and that's when you come in, maybe kind of help illuminate the thing. Okay. I always say, oh my God. Something quippy, something like that. Okay. Then what we do is you kind of repeat the process. You come into transition that kind of, again, transitions to the next point, helps guide you through, much like broadcasters do when they actually kind of give you a news report. They kind of bring you from place to place, point to point. Okay. So basically, you have another transition essentially that maybe like others say that the campus is too dark and not enough lights, and that contributes to the crime problem. Okay, another point that helps illuminate, oh, how does that, why does it make them feel that way they do? So you have like 2 points that back up the larger lead. Okay, this one and this one, and then you have an anecdote that brings, essentially backs up each transition. Okay. Mary Jane, haha. That's a full name. How about Mary Davis, right? Mary Davis said she doesn't like walking around on Easton Avenue. Sometimes that area is like pretty poorly lit, so because it's poorly lit, that sort of thing. Okay. We'll be getting more into that into the future as we get into like deeper stories, but transitions kind of again help guide the reader through. Okay. I'll be getting more specific into that because we're going to be doing stories that actually are a little bit more substantive and maybe like the profile stories we've been doing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, okay, so yeah, to be fair, obviously that's like trying to show as many perspectives as possible. I have you reading chapter 13 because I believe that broadcast news is probably like the way that's actually written, you know, is basically like probably the best example of like where writing is, especially is going right nowadays, and why I demonstrated to you before when I showed you the Walter Cronkite old-fashioned style of actually showing the MLK assassination, that sort of thing, is being as directed and to the point as possible. And it's really much more in demand nowadays, especially with the internet, especially with social media. I mean, you have things that are written, you have headlines, you have like first paragraphs, leads, essentially like reproduced and recirculated into social media posts. So it's so much more in demand nowadays to really be as sharp, as concise as possible in your stories. Okay. So anyway, and my dog is barking. So if you can give me like 1 minute here, I have to actually pause the recording. All right, Lily. Oh my gosh. Actually, I didn't realize that the thing kept going. Sorry about that. I actually thought I had, hold on 1 second. I apologize for that. I thought I actually hit pause. So, but I didn't. So anyway, let me just go back to the broadcast news. All right. So broadcast news. So basically it actually shows you like essentially like some examples of like, you know, how they get there. Essentially, like you have essentially broadcast news copy, print news copy, and police are looking for an Austin woman this afternoon. I mean, it's very much. I mean, it's a little bit too short of a sentence, I would say, but basically, it's. I provided this chapter to kind of really show you like we just don't deal with every try to deal with every platform here and every news structure that I talk about, and the substance that you get and how you want to develop it into a news story. I mean, it basically has like the same kind of very similar formula and everything, but the platforms just kind of like do it a little bit differently. And the print platform will be a little wordier than the broadcast news copy. But you can see right here, like there's not necessarily like a style or like adjectives that are pumped in there to basically like glorious this. You know, it's more about just like getting really right straight to the point. Police are looking for an Austin woman this afternoon. Maria Lopez fled Travis County Courthouse moments after being convicted. And you see there's spaces here. It almost reads like, I always tell people that actually like probably like one of the best examples of like um of a medium that really kind of like adopts like almost sort of like a journalistic format is actually like movie scripts. Because when, if you ever notice in the script, there's lines and spaces in between, okay, that give, you know, the obvious being that basically that, like, you know, each line is like specific and succinct, and then there's spaces that kind of give, you know, pauses as they would in a conversation, you know. And that's how it's actually the news stories are actually presented on the internet medium, at least, okay. um so it provides you against like examples of like how there's actually like essentially a script. I've actually been doing this myself. Again, I've been writing a script myself actually for the I'm trying to get a little bit better at it, but from where I work right now, because actually I do video work and I'm actually pretty bad at it, I gotta admit to you, but I'm getting better. um and I have to, and I've noticed that actually when I've been reading them out loud, I've been writing them almost like in more of a print journalism format, where like longer sentences and that sort of thing, and I end up tripping over what I'm saying. So you have to be as succinct as possible, and like, and they always keep telling me, "Oh, you got to punch it out. You got to punch it out. You got to punch out what you're saying." You know, basically, like, I'm not. It's more than just having a conversation with somebody. It's almost like I'm alerting something to somebody, and it's very important for me to tell them, like, right now. You know, all right. So, so that's basically what the what the broadcast is, and that's why I provided that. Okay. Um, all right. So let me go to the last thing to talk about, and that is that we have a new assignment that is actually posted. And by the way, I meant to say also actually, and I actually have a section that actually on the modules where I actually have a video that like goes into depth about like where, and I did this a couple, maybe a year or two ago, about how and I'll be talking about this in class too, but basically how to basically do a story from top to bottom, where I just deal with that specifically. Okay. And actually, let me go back to that. Okay, it's sharing the screen. If you actually look under week 4, September 26th, which is coming up, I have a Tom Davis news writing instructional video. So you'll see it right here. That's a YouTube video, and I did this during the thick of the pandemic. And again, it gives you much of what I just already kind of talked about, but alluded to, but I'm going to be talking about like more over the course of the next couple of weeks. But if you really want to kind of in a short supply and quick to the point, here it is right here too. Okay. There's a video again, it's under September 26th. Okay. So that's where that is. All right. So our new assignment, again, I have this in teacher mode. So it's not posted live yet, but will be posted live when you get this notification on Monday. Okay. So yeah, this is not meant to be critical or anything like that, but just basically constructive criticism, really. But it says, so I got my first taste of where we're at in this class. We're reading our very first ungraded stories, and you're by problem osmosis. We got to work on the fundamentals, much as what I've been talking about. The some here are like some of the common issues I run into right here. All of which I explain in the video. I need Microsoft Word docs. That's a big reminder on that, not PDF. Please don't put it on PDF. I can't create a PDF. Maybe there's a way of doing that. I don't really want to know at this point. So, and this is not a creative writing class, so please avoid the glorious adjectives that do nothing but clutter up the story. As I was showing you with the broadcast news copy, hey, they just want to get that news right there and punch it right out at you. So, you must write in the third person voice. That's he, she, it, they. Okay, not the first person, I, me, we. So basically, write about a fly on the wall trying to keep ourselves with distance from the material of the story and just write about it objectively. Paragraphs need to be no more than 2 or 3 sentences, and the lead really should be no more than 1 sentence, okay? Full name on first reference, last name on second and future reference. Okay, remember that. I've said it a few times. Try reading out loud. It's actually a technique that a lot of people use because that way, I mean, it's something you should probably do anything you write. That way, you kind of, when you read it out loud, it actually kind of like makes a little bit more sense to you. It's what your natural ability of doing things is basically to speak it basically before writing it. So if you say something and it kind of comes out garbled, it's hard to talk or hard to say it. I noticed that when I was doing my broadcast videos for my job, it was, difficult, and I had to realize that I had to fix my scripts because I wasn't writing them in a clear way that people can understand. Look for the unique and new in reporting, and when you find it, you dig for details. That's what you do in your interviewing process. You kind of hone in on a specific thing once you do your interviews, and then you dig into it, okay? Once you find that unique piece of information, stick with it throughout the story from top to bottom. Those are the primary details of the story. Second details, like secondary details to be mentioned, would be things like Rutgers student, that sort of thing. That could be kind of spread out throughout the story. I mean, if you're actually dealing with a story about a Rutgers student, you should actually like mention in the lead that the person's a Rutgers student, because you want to give them a sense of place of where they are. So that's part of the who, what, where, why, when. Okay. So so the second assignment, the second grade assignment is actually like worksheets. Please do them. Please do the leads. Okay. Please do not write headlines. I say that again. Please do not write headlines. Please do not write headlines. Okay. I've had people do this assignment and they write headlines. Do not write headlines. They're different. It's a different style. You're not writing very short things. Okay. You're writing actual full sentences. Okay. And I'm going to show you what this assignment looks like right here. When you can just download it right here. What you do is you just basically take out a Microsoft Doc and you're going to get these little clips of information right here. Okay. The survey was released, but these are not leads themselves. It's just information for your story to write a lead. Okay. And you take what's here and you basically write about what you think is unique, new, and interesting. Okay. And almost you have to go through almost like a selection process. The statistics show that the number of child abuse or neglect cases reported this year rose from 2.7 million to 2.5 million. More than half of the children who died were under the age of 1. The 79% were under the age of 5. So, 3 to 4 children die every day. You almost have to pick almost like a sentence here or like a piece, that sort of thing. You don't write down I've had people write everything here. No, that's not a lead either. Okay. And that's not that may feel like that's the safe way of handling this because you got everything down in there. But no, that's not what we do. We don't pad. Okay. We just basically write the specific idea that should be the lead here. And that means throwing out everything else. So basically you have to kind of decide here. Is it like interesting or new or whatever? I mean, it's a horrible topic to deal with. When it goes from 2.5 to 2.7, the increase, does that sound like something that's common or unusual? Or when you have 3 to 4 children die every day, what's the thing that you really need to lead with? The new discovery here. Maybe choose between those 2 sentences here. Put yourself in the shoes of the reader. What do I want to know? What's new and fresh to me? And that's what you should lead with. Okay. Right here again, you have an abortion demonstration. What's new and fresh? The latest thing that's happened here. We have a fire. We have, happened right here. We have a murder rate. We have skin cancer, etc. On. And we have these right here. So you take this information, you don't write headlines. You write a full sentence, basically noun, verb, and then what happened, direct object, and what happened, and tell me what happened. Okay. As much as possible. Okay. In unique, new, and fresh way. Okay. And you put that in the Microsoft Word doc and number them, 1 through 7 is the first section, and then 1 through 5 is the second section. And that's it. Okay. And then you submit it to me on the assignment entry, which will be posted on Monday. Okay. All right. So that's it. And I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. I know it's again a bit of a long video, but I appreciate your attention. Let me know if you have any questions. I've had people basically send me some stuff with questions. They want to know if they're in the right direction. So go ahead and do that if you like to. And that's it. I'll talk to you. Let me know if you need anything. Thanks. Bye.